MeAdi ቤተሰብ ኩላትና ገቢብና ኣብታ ዓባይ መሶብ
Acknowledge that we're on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, which are the Duwamish people, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. And then we'll also do a little bit of a moment of silence for the murder of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Tamir Rice, Sandra Block, and many more Black folks, known and unknown to all of us. So we'll just take a hot second for a moment of silence.
My name is Ricardo Casetavene.
Hi, my name is Salam Zacharias.
My name is Jonas Fikak, and my pronouns are he, his, him.
I'm Sanaid Elbe, also known as Sanaid Hapte. I use she, her pronouns, and my passion is just connecting youth to resources and youth empowerment, women's empowerment.
How Black are you?
So black.
Yes.
Oh, that's a surprise question right there.
I'm sorry.
How black I am, that's a good one. I'm black as I come, man.
How black am I? I think I am so blackety black.
I'm just so black. I am like very comfortable in it.
You know, back home, you don't consider or you don't really think about how Black you are, you know, but whereas here, you think about it every day because your life depends, or your life is defined by how you regard yourself or how you see yourself or how you were seen by others. Given the protest that we have seen in the last few months against the murder of Black folks, how have you been personally impacted, and what has been your reflection?
It's been I think different emotions every day. I think some days you have your high moments and you have your low moments, and I think as a whole, what is happening is a tragedy, but it's been happening. These things are just now getting filmed, so it's not. I'm not shocked by it. I've been in America for 36, about to be 37 years, so this is not something new or things that I'm not surprised by them, but I love the movement that it has taken. In my lifetime, I haven't seen the type of movement that is occurring right now, not just here locally, but worldwide. So that's been really exciting to see, but it's happening also in time of COVID. So people are risking their lives to go out there to, to take a stand. I'm proud of the young people mobilizing, and I think technology and being able to gather at a moment's notice has been really, I think, has helped the movement and shape it in a way, and sharing of information and resources. For me, it's been a beautiful thing because it's been a hopeful thing, like, right? So I'm praying and hoping that this thing is going to move at the speed of technology, and I'm feeling very hopeful. Even going out to see the protests and be part of this movement and be part of the history, and just trying to get young people also to remind them we're holding like virtual spaces and conversations for our youth to really remind them also to think about their mental health and how it's impacting them and everything that's they're being a witness to, because we need their minds for the long haul. So that has been kind of to let them know that it's okay to take a break from it all. It's okay. You don't have to respond to everything that your little friends posts, because they feel like they need to be there to defend their position. And sometimes their mental health is way more important than that. So trying to teach them how to be present and fight a good fight, but it's okay also to think about yourself and your mental well-being as well. So
Every time we have people here and we ask the same question, and we get like slightly different answers from different people. And then when we get different answers from different people, it gets me thinking, right? Like it gets me thinking in a different way. I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that, right? So I appreciate what you just shared. There are people who are actively willing to undermine the movement, people who are just racist and willing to be okay with being racist, are actively trying to undermine the movement. And there's a lot of young people who are trying to respond to them, and a lot of energy spent doing that. And I'm realizing, like, I'm like, whoa, step back. Let's think about how to channel this energy into a place where I want to actually like lift up those people who are doing the work. I want to spend more time with them, help them. I want to contribute in different ways. I want to spend my energy doing that instead of responding to those people who are like trying to undermine the movement, who don't get it, don't want to learn, right? Don't even want to learn, actually. Like, it's not even like, oh, I don't understand, let me understand. It's like, I don't care. I don't need to learn. I don't need to hear you out. Instead, I'm just going to spit out oppositional things, right? So those are people who are not worth our mental health at all. And I think like what you just said about like young people watching for their energy and taking care of themselves, because I feel more taken care of when I can speak to people who are willing to do the work and who are like, okay, I don't understand everything, but I'm willing to go and do the work and support the movement because I understand at the heart of it, the work is about human rights.
I have brothers, you know, so it's scary. It is, I feel hopeful. There's like mixed emotions. I can't really describe it, but I am happy they're doing what they're doing now, because it's just gone too far. You know what I mean?
One of the things we wanted to do with our time together today is to really focus on like how do we have these conversations with our family members? How has your family reacted to the protests and the call for racial justice, and why do you think they reacted the way they have so far? Good.
I think for me, we've been here for I think about 13 years now. And I think like me and my brothers do understand that, but like my mom and my sister, it's kind of different, you know. نساتهم you know أبي تراي معي. أجي أبزعد مس متسخاني كناي مش عارفة نايقرب عامتات كسيت راح لهم experience مش ده. أجي بزح زتنا دق أنا قرأت لهم بزح نقر زتنا دق أخبلك زعابي يلو مسؤم زعابي نقرأنا. حبشينا نحنا إيرتراويننا نحنا كم زندا بركة حتى عبي مش أجي أنا أبزم مسمت أخاقاني اتتصعدا زم أب تي في زرعي كان يتسلم تنقر نحركوين عملت مالتي كلاتهم سراتي انتهي بحال شقوط والشقوط حيزم كودو قالي خاطري مش أجي نحنا عبد قاعد تمرتني اليوم نفس رح اليوم قالوا مش قالوا تي زعابي يسكو ما يكون مش يوم زعابي كوميونيتي قالوا تسلمتي مالتي and then it's يوم ولدنا زريو وجن كاب سرحنا بجزء okay هجي نساتهم زريو كال picture يوم زريو هجي أنا يرداني normal هجي نعدي كردان كله جنا من البعض نيشتي ساشي was like oh زيوم عوالي يوم زيوم كستيت بلا كامش نبزع بنا يتسلم تنتقين مالتي but it's not like that you know لك أنا ولا نحنا عبدك عند حروتيهم كومي يوم مالتي مش ده بعيني سعادة خطريهم كلها لك كم ساعة حسبه مالتي actually أنا كأدميك إني I think إن شو منت عم شو عملت نا مايكل براون إيريك كارنر قالك موت خلوا شو يخيدني إيريك بروتست خجبر ما نعتو like ساعتهم أفتناتي إذا برا علمي قراربو نيرهم نحواتي علمي قراربو يوم زخب لكاس زي محواتي تزخون نس انت خجبر يخيل هجي كاب شو جمير إن نعديك زاربا جميرة مالتي أجي مشالو no like سمعوا وايدرينه مسام تحوي سمع لك كيد دبلو خاخويني يسمعوا بناتهم مالتي بناتهم أنا سلام كوين خريو خلقوا مالتي عبتي أنا فوت خالة حكي مالتي تردي خان لها حجينا نشينا قبرنا جن حجينا مور كريو عبزناي ما ناي فلويد بقدامي مستقتل لكن قدم كريو كلو oh my god like مش عارفة زخونة بقى نفس خاصة كذا حزيز بلا كامش حجي مسؤول كريوان كله رأيه حجي actually I had arguments of كذانا كنزارب كلا ناس كم ذات فو كن رأي دلينينا no كن رأيه علنا إزاي قدم كن رأيه لنا كموت كله كن رأيه لنا أنا دس لزبلني أكان سأزخون كوي كن كن كتريه لك مهنياتو عند حركم وغيرك ignore غيرك يو that means you're ignoring اتخال إزخون زلو ساتب اتخال ولا اتخال سب يوم تعد ولا basically كم يوم زجور زلو كن رأي عند لينينا نتساقم كن سمع عند لينينا يبلو مالتي تردي خان لها ሕጂ ኖ ክንሪኦ ኣለና 10 ግዜ ከመን ክንሪኦ ኣለና ክስማዓና ኣለዎ ክፍለጠና ኣለዎ ምክንያቱ ዝኾነ ጻዕዳ ወድኻ ውላድካ ጸሊም እዩ ክብለካ እምበር ኤርትራዊ ዲኻ ኢትዮጵያዊ ዲኻ ሶማልያዊ ዲኻ ወላ ኬንያዊ ዲኻ ኢሉ ይኮነን እንታይ ኻ ኢሉ ኣይኮነን ድቐትለካ ሽጉጥ ከብረልካ ከሎ ማለት እዩ ሕጂ ኣነ ድስማዓኒ ብከለርካ እዩ ንዓኻ ብከለርካ እዩ ዝቐትለካ that's what I told her and then I think you have to ከምዚ after ውሽጢ ናይቲ ስድራ ቤትካ ኣቲኻ ክትዛረብ ብኣብነት ክትረድኦም ከለኻ ሕጂ ደቅኺ ከምዚ ተዝኾኑ ሚኪ ሓወይ ከምዚ ተዝገብርዎ ጴጥሮስ ሓወይ ከምዚ ተዝገብርዎ እንታይ ምመሰለኪ that's actually how I feel I'm scared every day and like ንዕኦም ንሕዋተይ 10 ግዜ ይድውለሎም ንመዓልቲ ኣበይ ኣለኻ ከመይ ኣለኻ ከምዚ ፖሊስ ተሪኢኩም ከምዚ ክትገብሩለኩም ከምዚ ይብሎም ኣነ ማለት እዩ ሕጂ ከምዚ ዘበለኒ ምክንያት ግን ኣነ ብከለሮም ንሳቶም በቲ እንተኣሽሞኦም ፍሬም ስለ ዝገብርዎም እዮም ማለት እዩ ሕጂ ኣነ ናደይ ከረዳእ ከለኹ ደቅኺ ከምዚ ገይሮም ፍሬም ክገበሩ እንከለው እንታይ ይመስለኪ ኢለያ ሽዑ ተረዲእዋ ማለት እዩ ልክ ዓፍቲ ውሽጢ ናቶም እቲ ውሽጦም እቲ ልቦም ድሰብሮም ነገር ክትረክበለካ ማለት ንክስታይ ማለት እዩ ነቲ መልእኽትኻ ንክተመሓላልፍ ማለት እዩ ኩላህና ሓደ ስለ ዝኾንና ኩላህና ፍጥረት ናይ እግዚኣብሔር ኢና በቃ እግዚኣብሔር ዝኣምን እግዚኣብሔር ናይ እግዚኣብሔር ዘይኣምን ግን ኩላህና ደቂ ሰባት ኢና ጸለምቲ ከም ስለ ዝገበረ ዘይኮነሲ ወዲ ሰብ ስለ ዝኾነ ከም ወዲ ሰብ ትሪት ክግበር ኣለዎ ኢልካ ሽዑ ኣነ ናብቲ the whole point ይምለስ ድሓር ተራዳዲእና ማለት እዩ በዚ ጉዳይ ሓቆም ኣለኹም ይብድልዎም ኣለው ገለ ግን ብዙሕ ክንደይ ግዜ ክትፅዕር ኣለካ
ንሱ ኢና ክንሰምዕ ኢና ሰባት ወይ ናትና community members እቲ ናቶም ተሞክሮ ኣብ ስድራ ቤቶም ዝካየድ ዘሎ ነገራት like what's happening in their family that's what we want to know that's what we want to share to our community members I wanted to ask you this though so they didn't want to watch the video that shows George Floyd dying on a camera why do you think they reacted that way why do you think they didn't want to see that
ጭካኔ ኢኻ ትርኢ ዘለኻ ምሻሎ I don't know ኣነ መጀመርያ ክሪኦ ከለኹ ነቂልሞ ምሽ ነይሩ ዝሞተ ሰብ ነይሩ ኣይረኣኹን ክሪኦ ኣይደለኹን 10 ግዜ ይሓልፎ ምክንያቱ you know ኢለካ ካብቲ ቅድሚ 7 ዓመት ጀሚረ የብል ነይረ ኣነ ምሽ ይኸይድ ነይረ ሕጂ there was no change every time ከምዚ ዝኾነ ሰብ ይመፅእ rest in peace እንዳበሉ ወይ protest ጌርካ ወይ ገለ everything was ignored ተረዲእኻ ኣለኻ እነን ሕጂ ኣብቲ ክመፅእ ከሎ መብዛሕትኡ ግዜ ኣነ ከማ ንባዕለይ ክሪኦ ከለኹስ it makes me sad I really get depressed about that it's really sad you know so I think for them it's sad it's like they don't want to see it I think እቲ ናቶም ድምፂ ይሰርሕ المخانس ዝፈልጡ ኣይመስለኒ ተረዲእኻ ኣለኻ እሱ ከምዚ ንሕናስ በቃ like one ሓደ voice የብልና ንምንታይ ወላ ፍርሒ ኸማን ኣሎ ኣብዚ ዓድኻ ከምዚ ደኒንካ ወፃእ ገለ like ምሻሎ ኣብዚ ዓዶም ኣይመስሎምን ተረዲእኻ ኣለኻ እንድዒ ከምኡ ኮይኑ ይስማዓኒ ንዓይ ማለት እዩ I just feel like ከምዚ ንዕኦም ዝምልከቶም ኮይኑ ይስማዖምኒ ወይ ድማ ዓፍቲ ናቶም ኮሚኒቲ ዝመፀ ኮይና ይስማዖምኒ even though ስለዘይንፈልጦ እምበር ቢድ ፖሊስ ዝሞቱ ብዙሓት ሓበሻ ኣለዉ ተረዲእኻ ኣለኻ ግን ወይ ድማኒ like ዝኾነ ምሻሎ ኣፍሪቃዊ ዝኾነ ተኣሽሙ ግን ኣይብልዎን እዮም እቲ ፖሊስ ዝበሃል በቲ ናይ ዓድና ነገር ዝፍራሕ ነገር ተረዲእኻ ኣለኻ ዝበዲልካ ወይ በዓል ፈለጥ ዝኾነ ነገር ገይርኸውን ገለ እዩ ከማን ዝብለካ መጀመርያ ናትካ ፀገም ናይቲ ፖሊስ ፀገም ከማን ኣይመስሎምኒ ሕጂ I feel like ከምዚ ኣብ ገዝኦም ስለዘይኣተዎም እቲ ነገራት ወይ ድማ like ምሻሎ በቃ like እቲ ዋላት feelings ከምዚ ብጣዕሚ ዘፍርሐካ ነገር እዩ ከመይ ጌርካ ክትሪኦ ኣነ ከማኒ እዚ መሊሰ ከማኒ እቲ ዘለኒ ሕርቃን ድዩ ዋላ እቲ ዘለኒ ክቕይር ኣለኒ ዝብል ህልኽ ንኽሕዘኒ ምክንያት ግድን ክሪኦ ነይሩኒ ማለት እዩ ከምኡ እንተዘይገብር ነይሮን ምስቲ ዝብለካ ዘለኹ ምስቶም ዓበይቲ ክረዳድአሎም ዝኽእል ምክንያት እውን ኣይምተረዳድእኹን ነይረ ማለት እዩ እንተዘይኸውን ነይሩ ኣብቲ ቪድዮ ኣይምተረአየን ኣነ ሕጂ ዝብል ናፍቶም ዓበይቲ ክመለሰካ maybe ፍርሒ ይኸውን ድምፂ የብልናን ይኸውን ብዙሕ ነገራት ክኸውን ይኽእል እዩ ኣነ ግን በቲ ኣነ ኣይትመስለኒ ከማንሲ እዚታት ከማን ኣሎ
I definitely like see what you said just now and you said it so eloquently in Tigrinya I'm even nervous to try to repeat that in Tigrinya because my Tigrinya is not as solid right now. But I definitely understood what you said there. I think it's like there is they're seeing something that's horrific. So on a human level, it is not something good to look at, right? To stare at. And so there's like this immediate like rejection to see that, and then B, they might not have related to it because it didn't seem like it's something related to them because they're Habesha, they're trans, I mean, who they might not identify as black themselves. But then I think like what you said was beautiful. You know, you appeal to their humanity. You appeal to. You also made it more
Personal.
more personal, and also like you got them closer to it, right? They might have like first like felt distant from it, but then you got them closer to it by pointing out your brothers. You said my brothers are actually considered, they're seen as black men out there, and they could experience very similar things to what George Floyd experienced, to what happened to George Floyd, to what happened to Ahmaud Arbery, or to Breonna Taylor, and so that's, I think that's powerful, like what you just said. So that's, and he said in Tigrinya so eloquently. I'm hoping that our family members will watch this. But let's bring in Sanai to here because I know it's been a minute since we heard from you. So what was your family like? What did they react, and how and why do you think they reacted the way they did?
I think our family has been here a lot longer than most Habeshas here. So I think for me, I think those conversations happened over almost 30 years ago now, 1992.
Wow.
With the Rodney King. And watching, that was the first time that there was a video of them beating him to death, basically. He didn't die, but near death. And to watch the entire trial unfold. I distinctly remember the not guilty, when the officers were found not guilty. And my dad works 2 jobs, 16-hour days. He leaves at 6:30 in the morning and comes back at 11:30 at night. So the short time he has, it's just the weekends. And I distinctly, though, to this day, I remember when I think we were having dinner, watching this in the news, and not guilty, Ilomo? And Ilomo, yeah, they did. And I remember the rage in him and just saying, like, I remember that distinctly. My dad, the fighter in him, he's ex-Tagadalai. If they just stood there and watched this, so this mentality of Zadi for many years, see, so sometimes our families, I think, don't identify with that. And somebody's there to drag you down. See, why don't they try harder? Like, as if this is not institutionalized racism. Is very difficult. Then I remember that night, LA was on fire. And I remember my dad being the proudest man there was. Because he said, that's what you need to do if you want their attention. But, there's a lot has not changed, evolved beyond that. Here we are. That was 1992. Here we are again. But I've gotten a lot of arguments outside, I think, my immediate family, because I think we have went to high schools here. We have went to colleges here, elementary school, middle school, you name it. We've had our shared experiences in terms of what institutionalized racism looks like in education, what it looks like just even with police, just interactions with simple things like a car, rolling down the hill and hitting a fire hydrant, with this police just automatically assuming that we did that on purpose and is going to ticket us and do all of these things. It's like someone must have stole it because we were watching TV at home. Those kinds of things where you're not automatically believed. And so I think we in my immediate family, we've been here so long that we've kind of gotten our fair share. But I think outside of our family and different interactions that we've had, that I've had with certain people, saying, why are they burning this thing? Not understanding like the agitators versus the protesters. Those are that kind of like, and I had to say, so I found myself saying the same thing my dad said how many years ago to someone who called me and said, why did you post this? They should protest like the Martin Luther King used to. Why are they being violent? I have had to defend that position and saying, I'm glad they burned it down in St. Louis. I'm glad they burned it. If they hadn't burned it down, nobody would be talking about it today. So I don't even, they built it. So if they want to burn it, let them burn it. And because they burnt it, they got the whole world's attention. So I'm kind of in a same, I find myself sort of my dad's mentality over time and just being here and just understanding that sometimes these things need to happen in order to, it's sad, but even with the George Floyd's incident, you look at, there has been some, silent protests. There's been people writing complaints about this police officer, specific police officer. I think there's 17 or so complaints against him. And there's another, I believe another incident where he killed a Native American person. So those were the silent protests. Those were the silent pleas for help. So he's got to go and he has to be convicted. And so to me, instead of looking at the actions of some people who are enraged, let's look at how they got here. Let's look at how we got here. Let's look at the 17 opportunities that the police department has to correct this before another life was taken. So I think switching the conversation to what has been done and a lot of people don't know, they're just gonna take those sound bites or those pictures that were circulating on social media. This is how you protest and this is a crime. And, showing, the legends, protesting, but they don't understand even those legends that picture. I'm sure everyone has seen this with Martin Luther King linked arm in arm protesting, but they don't know like 30 minutes later, they got beat down. So that's the image that's not with that picture, but it was circulating on Facebook with that on the top and people rioting at the bottom and things burning down, where these are all forms of protest and they all kind of go together. And even with those protests, the first one that went down in downtown Seattle, I was there. It was beautiful. It was peaceful. And it was the most beautiful thing I've seen. Like as far as I could see up that hill, how many blocks, it was just full of people. So many wonderful speeches, so much motivation, so much community building. And then me and my friend Stephanie came home once it started kind of getting crazy. And we came here, to watch all this exciting day we have witnessed. And all we saw was the violence, the looting. Here we go, perpetuating that cycle again. Nobody covered the beauty that was there that day. And so the media is naturally going to gravitate towards the negative space and negative energy and not really capture the beauty of what was happening, which is the movement. And that is, I think, a form of another form to stifle the growth or to stifle the movement. We keep concentrating on, look, they looted and look, they stole and look, I'm like, you want to talk about looting? I mean, the stimulus package and who it went to, that's $600 million that they looted. So you talk to me about that in terms of economic opportunities and who's gaining it, who's not. So Nordstrom's could replace all those items the next day, So in light of, we have to look at it in a greater context. So my family, in terms of my immediate family, I love the young people getting involved. My nieces and nephews, the other day, I think I went to a social distancing barbecue and here's my niece trying to educate the older, they're not older, they're actually in my generation, but like people who just came from MeAdi, more recent arrivals. And, they're arguing about, what do you mean defunding the police? And so the kids trying to explain to them what defunding the police means. It was just a joy for me as like 13, 14-year-olds. So it was important because they went to the protest, so here's the young blood, that's, to me, those conversations are important. They need to happen. And at those times, you just kind of support the young people and let them speak their voice. That's been, for me, beautiful to watch in different spaces. But it's been a journey. And it's, again, like Salam said earlier, everybody can relate as a human being to what took place in terms of George Floyd, like Adam Rodney King just on a human level. I don't care how you identify as, but on a human level, if you are able to see and identify as a human being and as someone who has breath, and whether he was a criminal or not, it does not matter. The way that, and this is from people who swore to protect and serve, So I don't know how people can disconnect from that and just go to, oh, he was a criminal, he was this. I really don't care. Like, he deserves a day's injustice like everybody else. I don't care if he was a murderer. That's not, there is, that is when you cross that line, you're taking matters into your own hand, and that is no longer a system that's working for the individuals, and justice is, you know, has, you know? And so that is something that we can just stick to and identify and kind of have that conversation around that and steer away from, you know, and just on a human level.
I definitely agree with you on terms of like people talking about, you know, rioting, and I think my favorite quote, I don't know who said it exactly, is rioting is the language of the unheard.
Martin Luther King.
You know, and I think that is like, it speaks for itself that people, because people were not heard, their demands were not met, were not humanized. That's the reaction you're getting. Instead of focusing on the reaction, focus on the reason why they're out there to begin with.
Yeah.
Right. Spend our energy doing that, and less of focusing on the damage of property. Like, how about damage on the murder of person, a human being, who's worth much more than property. So I definitely see that. I want to go back to what you said earlier, though. You said something about like how your dad reacted to the beating of Rodney King, and then the reaction to it, right? And at the time, he definitely was like, you said, like, he was up in arms, being like, yes, people did like have the right to react the way they're reacting because of what happened to Rodney King. Can you compare that to now? Like, what was the reaction today? Like, and specifically also maybe
he's still very proud. Yeah. He's still very proud. He's very proud. He's, you know, 78 now, and I mean, he's still very proud, and he doesn't get it in terms of, he doesn't get why they don't get it. But he has children, he has grandchildren. You know, we have all experienced a lot of different things, as like Salam says, in terms of what I'm saying, they didn't understand back then. And I think a lot of them, like Salam said, cannot really identify why they keep doing this to themselves, or why they, when I say they, in terms of African Americans, how they don't stand up for themselves. Because you yourself, like Carlos saying, I never saw myself, I was Sanite, you know, like when you come here, you're given a label. Like, that's not, in Eritrea, nobody says, I'm Eritrean and I'm black, you know? So you're just Eritrea, maybe that kind of stuff, but that's not the language, or that's not how they were brought up in terms of that, right? But the other component is, there is a lack of history being taught in this country, the entire US. So that has a lot to do with not just our parents, Masakin, they just came here and they don't know what they know, but like what they don't know, they don't know. Even us, we went to school and we didn't learn anything about Black history. We went to school here, elementary, and Black history or African American history does not start in the enslavement of Black Africans, you know, and that's the only chapter that you learn, and you learn about Martin Luther King civil rights movement, and that's it. That's all, folks. So to me, that's the first step, right? Really educating, glorifying white people, glorifying Columbus, glorifying, I don't know how you find a land or discover a land that was already there, you know, starts from day one in terms of American history. There's a huge part of history that's left out. So I think that contributes to not just our population, Habesha population, but I think it contributes to a lot of anti-Blackness within all communities, because if the only thing that you learn about Black Americans, about African Americans, is what you're taught in TV world, because the schools were not teaching you. So everything that was good and that was the contributions that white folks have made have been glorified, and the contributions of Blacks and Africans has been diminished and erased from history. So, so that I think contributes a lot to how we, where we are in terms of where our journey. I think everybody is on a different journey, and where they are in terms of anti-Blackness or how they self-identify. So a lot of people, you know, we're not Black, we're Habesha, we're Eritrean, okay. and trying to explain that to people, just that kind of tells you like where they are in their journey. and that we have to be patient, and being able to have these types of conversations are beautiful. So that we can, if anything, these movement, everything else has forced those conversations into our households, which is, I think, important for it to progress. These conversations need to be had, because I think it was my brother who told me this story back in the day, or is it my dad? So he was saying that that had all he would say had a grandpa had he would read him a story, and he would read him a story to every night, and every night the story is about a lion and a man, and the story, you know, to make a long story short, the story, the end is the man kills the lion at the end, and he tells it to him another night. Every time he's telling the story, so the lion's always killing. I mean, the person's always killing the lion. It's a heroic story, right? Of this man killing this lion as the end of that story. And so the kid one day, after many years of hearing the same story, Apo, come get you know, it's sabna timbasa. كل ጊዜ ዝቀትሎ እቲ ሰብከ ኣይቀተል እንዲ በትንበሳ ኢሉ ሓቲትዎ ማለት እዩ። So ተባሓጎሩ ይዎ ማለት እዩ። He said እቲ አንበሳ ታሪክ ናቱ ክጽሕፍ ምስ ጀመረ ብዛዕባኡ ክዛረብ ምስ ጀመረ ብዛዕባኡ ከኣኒ ዝቀተለሉ ነቲ ሰብ ከኣኒ ክንሰምዕ ኢና ብላ ኣሎ። So it's kind of the same thing where so far, you know, we're just beginning to see like Black history, Black contribution out in the surface, thanks to the media. I think, like, again, I'm going back to media and people being able to curate their own stories and tell their stories, their great-grandfather stories. That has been something beautiful that's coming out of this, and this the era of people being able to have a platform where they can publish things on social media, on blogs, that you don't have to have money to tell your story anymore. Here we are on Zoom talking about these things. So I think that has been the missing piece, not in all our cultures. Our story has not been told yet, you know? And the same thing here in the US, it's just beginning to be told. And I think once all these stories have been captured or incorporated into the US history books and into education, I think that will start, we will start evolving a lot faster, I think, because as long as you omit this out and all you see is okay, this, that she was saying like qatalti, saraqti, this and this and that and the other, that is the only picture, that's the only lens that you will have. But I think as long as we're starting to see movies and stories being written by Black people, produced, written, and films being made, and that's going to be a beautiful thing to see the next generation grow up through that lens and seeing like how powerful they feel, right? So you already have people putting young people down, and then you have history books perpetuating that behavior by in terms of all that they'll get to learn about in terms of Blackness is just slavery. And that is it, that you know, dwindles you down as a human being. It doesn't really empower you if that's the only story you know about your past. You don't know none of the inventors. You don't know all these inventors that white people took their inventions and wrote them as theirs. And you don't know all the great things Black people have contributed to the world, you know? So it's really hard to feel empowered, or, you know, we're talking about, I saw a post the other day, an 88-year-old man, he's a son of an enslaved person. He's still alive. So we're not talking about hundreds of years ago here. You know, so we need to have patience with our African-American brothers because a lot has been ripped from them. At least we know where we come from, we know and everything else, but this was systematically taken from them. And that's something, at least in our communities, something we tend to forget or we don't know because we're not educated about their history. So how can we know what has happened, what kind of trauma they have experienced over the last 400 years? Unless someone, nobody's going to tell Ade that. She's barely keeping up with what happened, you know, Ade, like there's no context to it. So it's really unfair for us to expect them to speed up and be present just like us and be in this time, because they lack that piece of knowledge. And
Yeah,
so
that's why we wanted to do this. Like part of the reason why we're having this conversation,
yeah,
you know, is to start having this conversation, to educate, to learn, to put this out there, for our families and for us to talk about it, and to also know how to, right? Like, how do we have these conversations with our families?
Yeah.
How can we understand their backgrounds and understand like where they might be coming from? Like Salam said, like you mentioned ways in which you've seen your family members react and why they might react the way they do. Because we do have to come from a place of empathy, and we're not going to change
Exactly.
anybody. Like we're not in a place to change anyone. No one can change anybody unless they want to change themselves. So
Exactly.
then
Yeah.
that hoping is this conversation will be that. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you, Sanai, for sharing that beautiful story. I mean, there is a saying that is like history is written by the victorious.
yep,
So basically, I think the piece that you said, also creating an alternative media, supported by technology, that is also powerful. I think these are revelations, or these are developments that that are continuously happening, and hopefully will create change in the future. I wanted to mention this. There is a resource, maybe you've seen it before. There is a document prepared by some people for Habesha people on a guide. It's a guide for to have a conversation, how to have a conversation with Habesha parents. I wanted to maybe share it on the screen later.
okay.
But I wanted to ask you these. So a lot of us have having these conversations, with at least members of our family or friends. How do you feel after having those conversations in your family? How do you personally feel after having those conversations?
I often like it's something I'm working on is I'm often frustrated after, because I try to explain, I try to share history, I try to educate, I try to ask really good questions, but I get a lot of pushback, a lot of like, or no, like we're not the same, or that's not us, or well, they do these things too, like he did this, or he committed this crime, or she was blah blah blah, she was involved in da da da. Like we know, like I've seen 5, 6, 10 black people, and they tend to act this way, or they overreact, they're loud. You know, a lot of like stereotypes come up as a defense, as a way to defend their stances, and often like I feel I find myself feeling really defensive. Like I find myself feeling really defensive. I find myself frustrated, and then all I'm gonna do after that is attack them. I like literally go in attack mode. Like, well, you've seen 5 to 10 people, okay? How many people have you seen? Okay, got it. I can name 5 to 10 Habesha people who are lazy, okay? Like, I can name them right now. They're like, well, Habesha people. Well, no, hold on. How many black people have you seen? And how many of them were lazy? You know, like I get into it, and it becomes very much like as if we're playing table tennis. You know, like I'm like they throw something at me, and I throw back harder.
Yeah.
And it doesn't become any productive after.
No.
And I'm still reflecting on how to do better in that, and to just kind of like let it be sometimes. Just don't expect them to really hear me out sometimes. And just kind of be like, that is the truth. And if you want to read on yourself and take time and like learn, I'm willing to give you resources. Otherwise, like we're gonna stop the conversation here because you're not really hearing me out. We're gonna have to like, otherwise we're just kind of like, we're gonna need some distance from each other after a few minutes because things just get heated up,
Yeah.
But we still love each other, like
Of course.
the next time we see each other as if it never happened. But yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, jump in. You can jump in. Salam.
Yeah, I think kind of similar, but like أنا مبدأ ጊዜ ክዛረብ ከለኹ ማለት እዩ مشالو كابل بيتسمعني مشالو تتصقم ناي زخونه سب زرعخو ناي زخونه سب زيكونس نتي شجر زقاطمو سب كزاربن كلو كابل بي دزاربمو حجي زخونه سب نحدي ترديكا وي دما actually زي مردا كمان يقولوني عارف كمزي they get defensive مش دو كمزي وي كمز خرد هو زيدة لي نقر كويني أنا عايد سمعنا مالتي أجي هذا كذي I just like okay I don't want to waste my energy if you're just being ignorant you know but I think كل جزء أنا كود أنكر له تحسبي إتناتي conversation مثلا كود أنكر له أنت يبلهم okay wait دحر حاموش شدش عمد قلعت وليهم دحر 10 عامات كتصنحيهم قلعهم مست أبجزهم مس أتوكم you will see how much scared you are and then you will remember oh I think حجي maybe 20 شو منتنا لو 20 شعتنا لو 3 لو you know علمي مالتي I wish أنا اتي دخلوا نجار غير نير تزخون ولادك أيرو لو محله كتب لي أخو ميرنا معناته I think بوز ignorant سبالو مش حجي مش كل سو كحرق أكلني وين مزخون you know تردي هلا باله بقى I think سلا بقى كردو سلا زيد لي نجار لي حسب مالتي حجي I think كومي أنا إذا حسب مالتي I think نعيدك أي أنا نسي لو ما عن تندحر أنا كغيره زي كيله خلا نجار كجبرت زي كيله ندك أي نخلو ناي كل سب هو تزت المثل لهم مالتي معناته whether like it's gonna change or not I have to contribute my you know I have to do something about it you know so
powerful
تزارب you know مشالو بس قدام تزارب كان مسودة كان تحرك الدا كاديك الكوين سب you'll see it انت يوم أبوتاتنا وأديتاتنا مش وليد كافتنا يلو I think إزيهم قلعت مشالو إزيهم عبيت سوت كوينهم زقتل زلو إزيهم ناشت قلعت كوينهم زقتل زلو ويد ما like مشالو بزي زخون المخنيات بسنكي نساتهم زمسلو تأتوا عبيلهم شجر زقوان فهم زلو سل سمونا أشتني يرمي تمال خالص سبعتني يرمي ترجع خلاص حجي I think نسوم سيك غيروا عام خمسة لون كردوا من فتن أنت زي كوينة جن I think كم زبالو يوناس دخلنا فرص كنت قبره يتخلني حاسة مش ده مسجزي جنا كمعارك وتي so I think نسخازك على كاتجبر تزي كوينة I can't take it personally like maybe like كم مش على بقى تشوز بلا حنقولهم كوينة تسمعنا هاني I just walk away I don't like that you know that energy person that does not want to learn yeah we don't we can't get along
I earned the name I earned the name Oprah from my uncle Sahel calls me Oprah yeah because oftentimes as a young person active and speaking against women you know anything related to women in terms of our language the way historically we put women down and their contributions I was wanting to get you know but now the way what they contribute and how they keep the churches together and how they keep things running but oftentimes they're not at the table voicing their opinions and making the decisions even though they do all the work and so to me I've always been pretty vocal and so needless to say I'm very passionate about certain topics and I will and it gets frustrating at times and I'm saying in different sectors and you're saying like how do I feel I try to educate I try to ask questions I try to bring perspectives and voices in the space and in the room that they might have not considered you know and I also keep in mind their lens and what context that they're coming from so I try to be also a good listener in that space because I have to hear their perspective where they're coming from if I'm going to try to get them to see my perspective. I have to know where they're coming from. That they're talking in this manner or to have this belief and to flip the script on them as well at the end when you know you gather information like any other person who's ready to defend a position, you need to listen and see what they're saying and where they're coming from first and foremost, and then try to educate or listen, hear their perspective. If people are gung-ho, like Salam says, about their position and they're not going to hear anything that we have to say or have to say, I'm gonna have to leave it at that. But for the most part, a lot of things, you know, there are things that they don't know. For example, I'll ask questions like, are there more basketball players, black basketball players, or more black lawyers? You know, and people will be like, oh, there are more basketball players, and, you know, and I'm like, no, actually, there's only how many teams? There's about 500 professional black players, but there's over 350,000 black lawyers, and they're like, I'm like, oh, they're not sitting here being televised on TV. They are working. You can't see them. They're working. Like, they're not gonna, their job is not to be on TV. Their job is not as glamorous. And these are the glorious, glamorous things that get glorified, but these are numbers that people don't often see. So sometimes it's good to hit them with those kinds of perspectives. Or like Salam said, it's good to put ourselves in that position, whether she talks about, you know, her brothers being the George Floyds of the world, that they could be driving one day and someone's going to stop them. And at the end of the day, this cop is not going to care you're Habesha, black, Orthodox, Muslim. All that they see is black. You are this tone, a different, you know, you are different. That is all that they're going to see, because that's not, like, what are you going to do at that point? So at the end of the day, you're basically driving while black. That's it, right?
You are, and that is, I think, yeah,
that is it. So
it really is.
To them, see, I'm like, like I will say that, and like,
yep.
It's not just affecting black men, also black women. So let's just stop making it about this thing that's happening to other. We are in this country, it's happening to us too. Like the justice system has criminalized so many of our young black youth, our young Habesha youth as well, whether they have mental illness, substance abuse, whatever that may be. So we're not far removed from that. We haven't been here 400 years. We've been here since the 80s. That's about it. The first families that came to Seattle is one of the few families right here. So we haven't been here how many generations? We have not been here 400 years. So to say, oh, you've been here this long, like, they didn't have an opportunity to keep that heritage and you've tried so hard to assimilate. They try so hardcore Western culture, like, I'm like, cultures, I'm trying to hold on to it to dear life. And South Africa, they're living in Eritrea. They're trying so hard to be westernized. I'm like, no, keep that culture, keep the beauty, you know? So it's like so much contrast there, you know? And so that's because, you know, when you're young, you're not taught to be, especially in our time, there's not I think Queen Latifah, that generation, when they start singing about I'm Black and I'm proud, unity and all this other stuff, that's the kind of music and culture, you know, art does transform minds. And I think that has a lot of influence on a lot of Black people in the time. That's when they started wearing the African logo. And, you know, every generation has its, a job to do, I think. And this generation has been tasked with this one to move that movement forward, right? And so, but when we were young, it was not, you didn't walk around with translate, like I go to schools to speak and things like that now. There's translated into Grinyang, and stuff like that on the walls, like translated, like you had to bring, you know, the kids. We were to translate us in the job interviews. Computer they used to fill applications. Doctor's appointment. Like there was no translators in the hospitals and schools. None of that existed back in those days. So if you guys can imagine a world where we didn't have access to all this information, there was a disconnect, right? Here we were in our little world, and here was the rest of the world. So it's mechanisms of survival, right? So those conversations, when you're in a survival mode, when you're trying to acclimate to this culture, when you're trying to erase yourself so that you can be accepted, deny your heritage, deny who you are, it's a mechanism of survival at times that I feel anyway. And so I've always been kind of a voice. I'm not gonna. I kind of take a little bit after my dad, where I'm kind of the loud one, and I speak up where I see injustice. And even in coffee conversations, I'm always going to be the person trying to shed light on some issue or another. So sometimes it can be frustrating, and sometimes, you know, you just hold your ground and try to see if I can get them to see other perspectives. And if I can't, it's okay. I mean, they're still your family. You can't do nothing about it. But for the most part, I think for us, we've been here for so long that oftentimes these conversations are going to happen, even if it's on a different level, because everyone, like I said, is on a different journey. And so, and then the people come in our lives, they may not be here as long and know actually the history of African Americans in this country and things like that. So I find myself explaining a lot of different things, but that's a conversation that's happening all the time. You can't avoid it. It's always happening, but everyone's gonna be at different levels.
It's true. We mentioned a lot of different things about how to approach these conversations and how we've approached these conversations in our own families and people who are close to us. I'm curious to like, how has those conversations evolved, and then like, what do you recommend? And we want to kind of do like give people like some clear, like some things that you've done in the past that have worked, or things that you've seen yourself evolve doing better and you've seen work better throughout time. I think one example you gave earlier was like taking the time to understand their perspective first, like bring them into the conversation and just focus on understanding why they're saying what they're saying is like really powerful, right? Like what are some other things that you've done that you've seen yourself do over time and have done better and evolved and been working for you?
I think በቃ ኣነ ድብል ማለት እዩ ከምቲ ሰናይት ዝበለቶ ንዕኦም ካበይ መፅኦም ናበይ ይኸዱ ኣለዉ እንታይ እዩ ኣረዳድኣናቶም ክትርድኦ ኣለካ ማለት እዩ መጀመርያ ክሰምዖም ኣለካ ሕጂ ነዚ ኩሉ ነገር ንክትገብር ካኒ ዓቕሊ ይኸድለካ እዩ ማለት እዩ ሎማዓንቲ ትዛረቦ ፅባሕ ከዓኒ ትዛረቦ ደጊምካ ደጋጊምካ ምስ ተዛረብካዮ እቲ ሰብሲ ምናልባት ዝኾነ ዘርኢ ትተክላ ውሽጦም ማለት እዩ ምሻሎ ክሓስበላ እዮም ገዛ ከይዶም ንፅባሒቱ ካልእ ነገር ኣለ ተረዲእካ ኣለካ ሕጂ ሎማዓንቲ ዘይተቀየረ ሎማዓንቲ እዚ ኣይሰምዕን እዩ ገለ ነዚ ሰብ እዚ ክዛረብ ኣይደልን እየ ደይኮነ I think ኣነ ከማን ህልኽ ይሕዘኒ ነዚ ሰብ እዚ ከመይ ገይረ ክረድኦ ኣለኒ ምሻለካ ሕጂ ከምቲ ሰናይ ዝበለቶ ዋላ ንስኻ ዝበልካዮ ዓቕሊ ጌርካሲ ምሻሎ ብዝተፈላለየ መንገድታት ብናቶም በቲ ናቶም ፐርሰናል ሂወት እዩ ብናትካ ፐርሰናል ሂወት እዩ በቲ ክርእይዎ ዘይደልዩ ነገራት ብቐዳማይ ዝናትኩም ምስ ሰማዕክዎ እንታይ ብነይሮም ንምንታይ ነቲኦም ዓበይቲ ኣቦታትና ኣዴታትና ኣኪብና ወይ ድማ ዋላ ዓበይቲ ጥራሕ ኣይኮኑን ዋላ እቲኦም መንእስያት ከማኒ ኣጋጣሚ ሕጂ ዝመፁ ወይ ድማ ብዙሕ ዘይገበሩ ንሳቶም ንባዕሎም ከማንሲ ነፍሶም ፍልይ ኣቢሎም ዝርእይዎ ኣለዎ ኣካይዳና ፍሉይ እዩ ግን ካልእ ሰብ እቲ ጻዕዳ ንዓኻ ዝርእካ ዘሎ ግን ጸሊም ጥራሕ ዝርኢ ዘሎ ደቂ ሰባት ክብደሉ ከም ዘይብሎም ብፍላይ ከዓ ጸለምቲ ንሕና ሳብቲ ውሽጢ ኢና ዘለና እዚ ከማንሲ ኣብ ናትና ኮሚኒቲ ከማን ይኸውን ኣሎ ምሻሎ ንሕና ንእሽተይ ኮሚኒቲ ኢና ሕጂስ ንሕና ካብ ሰብና ዝፈለየና ነገር የለን I think ምሻሎ ኣነ በቲ ኣድፈልጣ ማለት እዩ ኣነ I always try to relate ብኸምኡታት
I think you just said is on point as well. Just like tonight, I think it's I'm hearing like be empathetic, put yourself in their perspective, be persistent, repeat things, educate, share stories, ideas, make them see themselves as who they are seen by others, especially by white Americans, right? And I think that's really important things that people can take away from this conversation. And approach their family members, but also themselves, right? Like people are going to watch this, I know, who are going to think about themselves and see themselves reflected in some of these people that we're talking about, right? Both in both good and bad in some ways, right? Like good examples and not so good examples.
You know, I'm relatively new to the country, And there were times that that I had a conversation with my brother, younger brother, and we're both involved. We're both trying to stay informed, but definitely we lack. I definitely realize or recognize that I lack the history. I'm trying to learn.
I think my struggles have been trying to talk about it within our own communities, right? Like within our own lives, and personalize it so that these conversations are not, they're not going to just be about police brutality. When we're talking about anti-blackness, we're talking about what kinds of words we're selecting and what kinds of things we're sharing on just a very basic level, like day-to-day things, simple things like, you know, oh, oh, like, like, so how is it, like, what is salam, like, so the word salim or the word baria, harfaf, you know, that kind of stuff. See, you, and up to language not embedded you, you know, it's a I know it's a derivative from colonialism, and it's something within our, you know, it's a Italian do, Turkey do, English do at that time, these things permeated into our culture and in the way that we see ourselves. So first and foremost, we have to have love for self before we can love others, before we can bring good energy to the room, before we can embrace other people, period. Right. It's self-love. And that, when I say that, I mean in our own, like, it's a constant battle of like trying to make sure that you understand how amazing you are as a human being, and then you're not really resourcing to name calling. And, you know, I see a lot of that, especially on social media, and I don't want to look at the comments. So if I agree with you, great. Hey, if I disagree with you, like,
yeah, no,
I can't make a point without it's like, you know, a negative energy. Like, we can have an understanding, we can have a misunderstanding, and we can agree to disagree, sort of thing. But I think there's a lot of conversations, simple conversations, that are being had, and those are the conversation that I would, and I'm not afraid to kind of jump in and say, why are you saying that? Like, or the word LMT or Kamzi Gobru or LMT, you know, like those kinds of things, making sure that we understand that Nasi with one generation and is a chrome, like one generation and within our own communities. And if somebody was to interact with someone has derailed or who has gone a different way due to mental health, a lack of resources, whatever that, not to judge anyone that has is having a tough time in this country. Also having empathy, whether it's the way we are presenting ourselves and the way we even look at, even, you know, you go to church to find peace and things, and sometimes it's a sermon, natom, sometimes can be very, you know, comes aggressive. What I'm saying is, like, we don't have to look outside, little conversations. Oh, you know, it's even if we can minimize that, we can just start with that. Like police brutality, just how do we support one another? How do we love ourselves? How do we begin to know ourselves and our history so that we can live a life that's abundant, and that we can look at people first and foremost as human beings, no matter where they are, right? And so I've been most successful, I would say, in having those types of conversations and really dealing with what have you experienced here. I've done a parent workshop. There was supposed to be a college readiness workshop. That is one of my favorite workshops that I've done back in the day at the community. And we put the parents, and we told them to come and to bring the kids, but come as parents. So they didn't know that they were going to be separated. And I asked them just like 2 questions, like, how do you value education? How do you integrate education into your life on a daily basis, besides just saying, go to school. A kid goes to school. There's really not a lot of parent involvement as a part of their educational process. But here it's a must, because in order for your child to be successful in this very racist system, you have to go hand in hand with that child, right? So we had some of the most powerful conversations about, especially the older generation that's been here many years, to go back and really talk about what they thought, you know, especially I remember Mamher Kidane saying, like, as Mamher, in terms of how I related to my children and how I treated them when they told me certain things at school, I didn't believe them. So really giving wisdom to his experience from a teacher's perspective, because right? And so I thought that was one of the most powerful conversations, because there was so much talk about racism that happened that day. And the workshop was supposed to be an hour. We were there for 3 hours, where people were talking about, you know, my daughter, like, wet her pants because the teacher didn't believe her when she said, I need to go to the bathroom. So she was too embarrassed to get up and stayed there and refused to leave until all the kids leave. The humiliation, the embarrassment, just like the incidents of racism in education that transpired. I think we need to go back to those concepts, just candid conversations about what our kids are going through, because we can handle ourselves most of the time, but we have to look at, if we're experiencing it at this level, what are our kids experiencing, and how can we better support them? I think the best way to do that is to support the parents and have these competent conversations, and they realize that, oh wow, this is happening over here, and what does my kid have, you know, and kind of being forced to have those conversations was really good. I think that's one of my favorite till today. I think that was one of the most powerful 3 hours I've ever spent with a group of parents from all sectors, from Zarbayu already versus those people that are bringing their kids in. Another thing that was helpful always is also to just flip the script in terms of who we are, that is this journey, like it's my own personal journey. Hence, you have to respect someone else's journey and their experience and honor that as well. However indifferent they may be, we have to honor that. And if we're gonna say, listen to me, we have to be able to also listen. And so I think a lot of times in Habesha arguments, I think like you already thinking about the response before you really hear someone out. So active listening, I guess, is something that we need to practice more, that I actively try to practice. But it's again, if it's something that's really like you're passionate about, it's hard to not jump in, but just knowing that this is not going to be fruitful to the conversation, learning to really bite our tongue, and sometimes less is more. And you can learn and listen as to where they're coming from, to kind of, once you acknowledge and recognize where they're at, maybe they'll be more prone to listening to you in your perspective. So I think that that has been helpful, and something that has been that's something it's a practice and it's not easiest. I'm not saying that I've never lost my temper or things like that, but
yeah, no way. That's I believe you. I've been there too.
But definitely that is something that is ongoing, and to know that we're all on this journey together, and that there's no one bad, good, indifferent, but we have to respect one another and love one another. And first, I think love of self. That's first important. And again, going back to, there's a lot of our kids going through a lot of trauma even right now as we speak, and making sure that we are there to support them, because our children, if we have no kind of context, and they're coming home angry and they have no outlet, and in this society, in our culture, I did not see we've been on survival mode for so many years that there's no such thing as, oh, Kofilna can listen to the child and what they're going through, what they're feeling. that's not something that's practiced in a very, so understanding that they're growing up in a different culture and making sure that we provide space for that conversation.
Yeah, no, I think that you, every time I've asked a question in slightly different ways or something similar, you've had more to offer tonight.
Oh,
You're
thank you.
like, it's really awesome. I think it's like what you said there in terms of allowing people to have their own journey and meeting them where they are. And then when you do, but you do have to practice it.
Yeah.
It's not you're not like, and I appreciate your humility there as well, that it's not you don't do it perfectly, I don't do it perfectly, even though that is what I aim for. And it's something we practice over and over, we try to get right. Because without really listening and without meeting them where they are, nothing is going to ever be productive or helpful to them or to you. So I appreciate it.
You probably have seen this before. I went through it, I skimmed through it, and I actually realized that it's been translated into Tigrinya, Amharic, and Oromo, I think. I'm not sure about the accuracy of the translation though, but I believe it's a resource. So maybe we'll share it in our community at the MeAdi on the Facebook group that we created. But thank you, Sanait. Actually, Salam has just left. So this has been a very productive and very
I hope so.
insightful conversation. I really enjoyed listening to your experience.
Seriously, thank you, Sanait, for your time.
Yeah, this was fun. I hope I was helpful.
No, you really were. It was incredible. We can't wait to have you. I'm actually thinking about another topic that we maybe in the future can explore that you can join us with, is what you said about assimilation. Something I think a lot about, and I think that's a topic in itself. We can have like multiple episodes about, and really dig in, because it impacts me, it impacts you, it impacts Ricardo, it impacts the younger generation and our struggle to learn our culture, to keep our language. Like me myself, like I can speak Tigrinya, but like English is what like comes first.
Naturally,
but thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. Continue. Thank you for doing this. This is amazing.
Thank you. We'll reach out.
Thank you, Carlo.
Bye, Carlo.
Care. Share that link with me. I would really like to have it.
We will. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.